Blog Talk Radio.
Om Shabbat Shalom, Holy Way of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, I sense your presence. Om Shabbat Shalom, Holy Way of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, I sense your presence. And I am the light within your soul. In the essence of truth and right, love makes the circle whole. And here we stand in line, waiting for some sacred sign. But to find the balance is the purpose of this time. To restore the balance of the universal mind. And in the presence of my Lord of light and love, everything I see aspiring to be free. And when I call to thee, and come on bended knee, surrender to the all-pervading light and love. Reflections of the one surrounding me with love. And I sense your presence. I sense your presence. I sense your presence. I sense your presence. Within and without, above and below, yeah. East, west, north and south, I sense your presence. Without and within, below and above, yeah, yeah. East, west, north and south, I sense your presence. I sense your presence. Presence of my Lord of light and love, everything I find in tune with the divine. And here we stand in line, waiting for some sacred sign. But to find the balance is the purpose of this time. To restore the balance of the universal mind. And I am the light within your soul. In the essence of truth and right, love makes the circle whole. And when I call to thee, and come on bended knee, surrender to the all-pervading light and love. Reflections of the one surrounding me with love. For to find the balance is the purpose of this time. To restore the balance of the universal mind. And I sense your presence. I sense your presence. I sense your presence. I sense your presence. Om Shabbat Shalom, Holy Way of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, I sense your presence. Om Shabbat Shalom, Holy Way of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, I sense your presence. Om Shabbat Shalom, Holy Way of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, holy angel of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, I sense your presence. I sense your presence.
Thank you for joining me tonight on Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour. My name is Jessie Ann Nichols George, and I am your hostess. The music you heard at the beginning of the show is I Sense Your Presence by Shemshai. And I just want to say welcome, whether you're returning with us or whether you're joining us for the first time here. And I just want to mention, if you did miss last week's show by chance, Grammy nominee Stephen Halpern was on, and I highly encourage that you go back, listen to the archives, because we delved into how music affects us and how it shifts our brainwave patterns. A really interesting show there. Got a chance to play some of his music as well as listen to his thoughts there. Now, here at Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour, I look at the different ways that compassion exists in our lives, how to remove our blocks, resistances, frustrations, and more. And some weeks I'm discussing different aspects of compassion, how it works in our life, and the different areas of compassion. Lately I've had a lot of guests on the show, and tonight's no exception. I have a wonderful guest on as well for us tonight, Dr. Neil Kobrin. And other nights I occasionally do a coaching night where you can call in and have live coaching sessions on the air as well. So always a little bit of variety here. And what I do is to focus on helping you make the breakthroughs and answer the questions you have or deal with some of the things that are going on in your life. Now, in my own work, I also focus on helping people find and use compassion in their everyday lives. I've created the Genesis Clearing Statement, which some of you have experienced on previous shows, and if you've missed that experience, you can go back into the archives as well and catch those shows with that statement being used to work on things that we're dealing with in life. I've authored 2 books titled Activating Compassion and Activating Compassion, the Workbook. In addition, I've created the Compassion Tour, which is a multi-state nationwide tour that includes workshops, retreats, seminars, book signings, and fundraising events. I'm already working on a tour for this year, so gradually working on getting that put together. I do have a book signing tomorrow for any of those that are in the southern Utah area at Main Street Books. That's in Cedar City, Utah, on Main Street. It's real easy to find there, and I'll be there from 2 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you're in the area, stop on by, say hi, and see what's going on there. They'll have several authors actually at that event that they have going on. And you can follow up on any of the events that are going on for my tour at jessieannnicholsgeorge.eventbrite.com. And there's also an option there for gifting the tour. So maybe you're not able to make an event, but you'd like to support the work that I'm doing or help me get out to some of the fundraisers that I do, and that allows you to put in any amount that you choose to donate towards that work. And just as a reminder, if you're enjoying the show tonight, make sure that you tell your friends, your family, significant others, whoever, Facebook buddies, social media friends, and anybody that you feel inspired to share it with. And they can always listen to the show at the same link in the archives. They just click on that same link and they can listen to it at their convenience. There's a couple of other options for finding archives, and that is at my Activating Compassion Facebook page, which is facebook.com/activatingcompassion/notes. And I've got all the archive shows there, as well as on my website, which is jessieannnicholsgeorge1, that's the number 1.com. And if you go to the Main Street Universe tab and click Jessie Ann Nichols George, you'll find all of the archive shows there as well. So a couple of real easy options there. Now, before we get started, as those of you that have listened to the show before know, I like to delve into the 72 Names of God, Technology for the Soul by Yehuda Berg, and just pull a message. I like to kind of randomly go in, get a message for the evening or actually for the whole week. And then this message is put up on my website, on my Main Street Universe page for myself. So you can always go back in and listen and see what the message is and read it for yourself and freshen up on it. But just kind of randomly open up here, and it's amazing how it always applies to things that are going on and topics that we have for the week. And let's see what we've got tonight. And tonight, our message or our name of God for our week to focus on is sharing the flame. And it says here, a single candle lessens the darkness of a large auditorium, but no amount of darkness can extinguish the flickering flame. Even if the darkness were expanded, it would have no effect on the candle's radiance. Now, he goes on with insight to provide, and he says, darkness and evil are powerless in the presence of light. The relationship between light and darkness in the everyday world reveals a profound secret of spirituality. Darkness can exist only in the light's absence. Sharing the wisdom of those 72 names with another soul is akin to lighting a candle in our darkened world. For the knowledge and the letters themselves are the stuff and substance of spiritual light. The more we share these tools, the more we diminish our own selfish nature and the darkness throughout the world. The letters of this name are derived from a biblical verse on the tree of life, and its power is to bring immortality and endless joy. Kabbalah teaches that the tree of life is a coded reference to the unseen upper world where 99% of reality resides. This infinite hidden dimension is the true source of all joy, wisdom, and enlightenment. And then the meditation that Yehuda provides with this name. And it's very interesting because I talk about this a lot of times with compassion. When we're triggering compassion, what we're really doing is turning on that light. We're really igniting the flame, both within us and with other people. So it really is a powerful thing, and especially in these times where people tend to feel there's a lot of so-called darkness around them, using compassion as a tool to get there is a great way to share the flame, which is what we're focusing on tonight. And the meditation that Yehuda provides is this: concentrate on sharing light with friends, family, and the entire family of humankind. Take this name with you out into the real world and share these tools with others. Ask for the strength to walk the talk. In your mind's eye, envisage openings and opportunities in the world for the global dissemination of this ancient wisdom. Know that this name is arousing the focus of immortality and increasing joy in the world. Expect and demand nothing less. And the name is pronounced Mem Lamed Hey. It's Mem Lamed Hey. And again, that is a great aspect of compassion, because as we share this light, as we go out, as we do those little things in our everyday life, whether it's opening that door, whether it's waving at the neighbor, we're igniting that flame. So see what you can do to ignite that flame this week. I think that's a great thing. Now, a little thought on tonight's topic. We've got mindfulness as our topic, and again, we do have a guest on, but I want to share this bit of thought here, and that is, when we're looking at things today, for a lot of us, it's very, very challenging, and a lot of people may wonder, is emotional well-being a reality for the average person? It seems that the harder times get, the less tangible this seems for many people. Fears arise, and we fall into these cycles that keep us locked into those odd patterns of fear. And the concept of emotional well-being, sadly, has become kind of foreign with a lot of people. Now, we've gotten to a point where we are no longer putting enough emphasis on this. Or should I say, have we gotten to that point? I would like to think we haven't, and I don't think my guest believes that either. The good thing is that we are seeing more and more bridging of the psychology and spiritual avenues when addressing these very things. And Dr. Neil Kobrin has done this. developing what is known as mindful psychology. What is interesting about this work is that it is founded in the art of mindfulness. The foundation of this is about being in the present moment. Many have touched on the concept that happiness can only happen in that present moment. And the challenge for people seems to be in learning to remain very present. And if we can do this, it seems that we would be very strong in our own emotional well-being. Now, based on this aspect of learning to be present most of the time, it would also allow us to dissolve a lot of our challenges due to living in a more pleasant state of being. So we know this as we raise our vibration, as we live from a more loving, heart-centered space, from a conscious space, that we dissolve a lot of our challenges automatically. They'll fall away. And so I have some questions. How are you creating mindfulness in your life? What are you doing for your emotional well-being? And is happiness as simple as learning to be consistently aware that we are safe in this very moment? It's a lot to ponder. But when we get down to it, if all you focused on is this very second, this very moment, do you feel safe? Do you have anything to worry about? No, we really don't. I'm looking forward to delving into this. Our guest tonight focuses on a component of compassion that is related to compassion with the self. As many of you know, this is a very important thing that I bring out in my work, Activating Compassion. And it is also a part of the work that I'm bringing out into the new books I'm getting ready to release within about the next week here, which focuses on relationships. And that aspect is that it is important to fill ourselves first in order to be able to give to others, and to be whole within ourselves in order to develop the relationships in our lives that become so fulfilling to us. I'm going to take a short break, and when we return, I will have Dr. Neil Kobrin with us. He's going to be sharing his work on emotional well-being, embracing the gift of life. And the song that I've got for you during our break tonight is called Wells Cathedral. It's by Claire Hedin, and you can find out more about Claire's work at www.clairehedin.com. That's CLAREHEDIN.com. And we'll be back in just a few minutes. And I'd like to just say welcome back. You are listening to Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour, and my name is Jessie Ann Nichols George. I'm your hostess this evening. You were just listening to Wells Cathedral by Claire Hedin, and if you'd like to find out more about Claire's work, she brings a lot of spirituality into her music and a lot of heart there into it as well. And her website to find out more about that is www.clarehedin, that's CLAREHEDIN.com. And I'd like to bring on my guest tonight, Dr. Neil Kobrin, who is a licensed clinical psychologist, LCSW, MFT, with decades of experience in human transformation and emotional well-being. He authored Emotional Well-Being, Embracing the Gift of Life, is founder and president of the Academy of Mindful Psychology. He is an international workshop leader in mindfulness and emotional health, which cultivates awareness, promotes tranquility, and shifts consciousness to advanced emotional well-being. Dr. Neil is well-versed in mindfulness and Buddhist psychology. He's a member of the Spirit Rock Meditation Center's Sangha and has facilitated workshops with Zen Master Genpo Roshi, as well as in the Big Mind process, and co-developed a derivation of the process called Mindful Voice Integration. We will look at his work as it blends psychology and mindfulness tonight, and you can learn more about Dr. Neil on his website at www.drneilkobrin.com, and that is DrNeilKobrin.com. And I'm going to go ahead and get his mic opened up. It looks like I've got his mic opened up here. And Dr. Neil, it's wonderful to have you here tonight on Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight.
And what I'd love to do is to just start by having you share with us kind of your story, what brought you into the work that you're doing. Give us a little bit of background about yourself and your work.
It's funny. For a couple of decades, I ran graduate schools of psychology, and I ran a university as well. And, usually on a monthly basis, I would have a group of potential students that would come that would be interested in either pursuing a doctorate in psychology or a master's degree in psychology. And I used to say to them, as I discussed this profession of psychotherapy in particular, that priests are called by God and therapists are called by their family of origin. So I think that many of us that find ourselves in the helping and healing profession need not look too far from our family of origin to understand how we got into it. But so that's sort of the short answer to that question. I've been working in the field of psychology for many decades now, and I think I truly was oriented at a very, very young age, given my role in my family and my story, and the level of sensitivity that I think developed given what was going on in front of me on a daily basis. So I soon became a psychologist and went into the field, practicing as a clinical psychologist, seeing patients and clients, and eventuated into teaching and then running several schools. And along the way, I was always oriented to a philosophy that was much more aligned with really Buddhist thought and Buddhist philosophy, although not necessarily classic Buddhism. But, I started young in life. I was reading comparative religions, quite frankly, at age 11. I was interested in that stuff. So I think it came kind of naturally to me, and it's no surprise I come from several generations of rabbis, actually. from Russia, and I always thought for myself that being a psychologist was like being a modern-day rabbi. So spirituality has been part of my world as well my entire life.
Wow, so that really is quite a heritage to have that exposure from that young of an age and to do it. And I think it's true. I think when we look at the rabbi culture, for example, that there really is a lot of psychology involved in it, and making that branch over. So that's exciting to hear that. Now, you've got some different work that you do, and I guess one of the things I would like to start with, since our topic is based on mindfulness, how do you describe mindfulness? What is that?
Right. Well, I think the easy way to describe mindfulness is just really to remind all of us, to remind myself, to remind you, our listeners, our archive listeners, that this, in fact, is the only moment that we have. That's it. There is no other moment than this experience that we're having right now. And so often we are involved in our thinking life about the past or about the future, but the reality is we can only experience this moment. There is no other moment that we can experience. We have memories, of course, and even our memories are, at best, reflective of something that's occurred, but memories are not fixed, they're not solid. They actually get pulled from various parts of the brain, and they coalesce each time we have a memory. But even during a process of thinking about memories, this is it. This is the only moment we have. And mindfulness is about really acknowledging, is embracing that awareness, the awareness that this is the only moment that we have, and embracing it in such a way that is non-judgmental, accepting of what the reality of the experience is, and ultimately paying specific attention. Actually directing ourselves to pay attention to the moment at hand and training ourselves to do so. It's so interesting. We've all had experiences where we're driving on the freeway and before we know it, we've missed the exit. Well, that's a classic example of being preoccupied. That is not truly, obviously, paying attention in the moment. And mindfulness is about a dedication. It's about a commitment. It's about saying, okay, this is how I'm going to change my life. My life is going to be oriented to truly committing to paying attention in the moment in a non-judgmental way and accepting the experience at hand. And that's really the simple, basic element of what mindfulness is about. And it has tremendous impact on what our experience is in life once we really move to that dedication and move to that commitment.
And you bring up a good point with commitment, because I think that a lot of people I've known have gotten frustrated with mindfulness because it's like their mind is constantly wandering. It's constantly going out someplace else, and they haven't made that commitment to being mindful. It's kind of like a lot of things, I would say, in the sense that you can have these great tools, but if you're not using them,
right,
what good do they do you?
Right.
And
right.
Commitment's kind of the same way. You have to make a commitment to that process or that awareness. And when you do, I've found for myself using it, it opens this whole new door, because when you drop into those fear spaces and you start worrying about things, if you can stop and just say, okay, right in this very second, am I okay?
Right.
Well, yeah, I'm okay.
Right. Absolutely.
And what am I going to miss if I'm not paying attention to this moment?
Right. No, absolutely. It's interesting, mindfulness essentially has two branches, if you will. There's formal mindfulness, which is mindful meditation, and then there's informal practices. And I always found it to be very interesting that when you talk about meditation, and we can talk more about this, as we go along, that the reference to meditation is practice. So how is your practice going? And what's interesting is when you step back and you think about that you are in fact practicing something during meditation, it really changes the vantage point that you have about the act of meditation, because that which you're practicing is actually paying attention. Meditation, for example, is a practice in cultivating attention. It is allowing you to train your mind that orients to be more fully attentive to what it is that it's looking at. And it's very interesting. I mean, people have a very difficult time meditating. Many do. And I know, I don't want to date myself, but I certainly go way back to the Beatles. And I remember when the Beatles went and got involved in transcendental meditation, I said, well, I got to try this. If my idols, if you will, are doing it, I'm going to do it. And back then, everyone that I knew believed that meditation meant having no thoughts. And I was very frustrated because I could not reach a place where I had no thoughts. And I really felt essentially like a failure at meditation. It was just frustrating. Now, that is not what meditation is about, and it's certainly not what the current culture, whether in the West or in the East, is in regards to meditation. In fact, meditation is about attending to your thoughts. That is, being aware when a thought comes in and sort of just acknowledging the thought. Bowing to the thought is one way of thinking. Some people suggest literally labeling the thought. Oh, that's a planning thought, or that's a worry thought. And then returning back to something that is stable, like the breath. And in that moment of being moved away from paying attention to the breath and realizing that you're concentrating on a thought, that's awareness. That's an absolute moment of awareness. Your ability to say, oh, I'm attending to a thought now instead of my breath. That's awareness. And then returning back to the breath strengthens the ability of the mind to be alert, to be aware, and to be mindful. So that's just an example of how we can train our minds to be much more attentive.
And I love that you brought that up, because I think so many people feel like, oh, I got a thought, I'm failing at meditation.
Right.
But bringing in that fact that just the awareness that you had that thought is good, because it's actually cultivating that attention and actually achieving what you're wanting to a certain extent through meditation, which is building the awareness.
That's correct. That's right.
And I know that you mentioned, or I found it on your website, I believe, that mindful meditation is good for several things. It's good for motivation, it's good for sleep, it's good for depression, and these are all things that people are struggling with today.
Right. I would say that the biggest change in the last, I'd say half decade, maybe a little bit longer, is that we now have the scientific instruments that can measure the effects of things like meditation. I mean, the people who have been involved in the meditation world, there are some phenomenal Western leaders that, early in their life went off to places like Asia, certainly Thailand and Burma and so on. They became monks. They were monks for 15, 20 years, and then they came back to the West, and they've become leaders in really Western meditation. Like, my teacher's Jack Kornfield, and he's amazing. And it really is about the ability to promote a way for people to settle, to basically really, connect with their stillness. And what people in the meditation world are delighted about is that scientifically now there is proof. And we're such a proof-oriented culture. We don't like doing things that has no basis. Even in psychology, everything now about psychology is called evidence-based. Oh my goodness, I don't know how often I hear this word, evidence-based treatment. When I was in graduate school, it wasn't about evidence-based. We're not all from Minnesota, but we're a prove it nation. Prove to me that meditation could be good for me, and I'll do it. So now we can look at the brain, and we can really delve into some very interesting findings, if you'd like, a little bit later on, in terms of what we see scientifically and the impact that it has. And it is good for sleep, and it is good for depression, and it is good for anxiety, and it is good for emotional health and well-being. But it doesn't mean that's why you should meditate. That's the paradox. I just put something on my blog that basically said, don't meditate for any of those reasons. Just meditate because you enjoy it. The whole idea of Buddhism in particular is to move us away from striving, away from grasping. The cornerstone of that philosophy is that we suffer in life because we grasp and we cling and we attach, because that which we cling and grasp and attach to, we believe will make us happier. And it's all an illusion. It's a delusion that that's, in fact, going to be the case. Look, when I was a kid, I don't know about you, Jesse, we grew up pretty poor in New York City. We were, lower middle class at best, and we all in the neighborhood thought, if we only had money. Those rich people out there, they got it made, And later on in life, you realize that money really, truly doesn't buy you happiness. And, everybody would stand up and say, well, I'll take it anyhow. Even lottery winners. Very interesting, the research on lottery winners. They're, people who win the lottery are far less happy after they've won the lottery than before. And I have a theory about that. I think that at least when you're poor, you have this delusion that if you had money, you'd be happy. If you're rich, there's no place to go then. If you're not feeling happy and you're rich, you can't imagine, oh my God, if I had another billion, I'd feel much better about myself. It doesn't work that way. So.
Well, and it's true. I mean, they've proven a lot of those things. It comes back to where you're at. If you're not able to handle money, you'll lose. They've proven over and over again. A lot of lottery winners end up poor within a couple of years,
right? Because
they don't have that happiness to start with,
right?
And they're so busy trying to buy it, and then they're in over their head again. And I'm glad that you brought up the aspect with a results-focused society, because we really do, and this is actually one of the things I've really am bringing up in the relationship books I'm getting ready to put out, is the concept of stop worrying about the destination. Stop worrying about how soon you're going to get married or how fast you're going to fall asleep or, these things. Right. And start enjoying being with the person you're with.
Right.
Start, get back to that moment, because it's about the journey and not the destination.
Always about the journey. Absolutely.
Always about the journey. And you can only enjoy that journey if you're in the moment and you set aside the destination.
Right.
And so I'm really happy to hear you talk about meditation that way and talk about these practices that way. Do it because you enjoy it. Do it because you want to build that attention, because you want to increase your level of consciousness, as opposed to doing it for a specific purpose, because I think society's gotten so purpose-focused, and that ends up generating a lot of disappointments for us.
It sure does. Right. Absolutely. And I would argue that, meditation alone I don't think it's the end all and be all anyhow. It's not about that. It is about a holistic approach to life. It is about what's called the informal practices as well. It is a commitment to awareness. One of the things I certainly tried to do in my book is to talk about perspective. To expand our perspective about things. It's so easy when we suffer an insult to just react in a defensive posture. I've had my challenges with a neighbor, and it's very easy to be reactive with that neighbor, and it's definitely more challenging to step back and have a greater perspective. And to recognize that, this is someone who is not enjoying their life. This is someone who obviously has a lot of negativity and a lot of misery in terms of what their journey and what their experience is about. And yes, I might be at the impact of it, but maintaining that perspective really helps me in relationship to him. And we're not really trained to do that. I mean, that's something I'd really love to talk about, actually, because I think that we have a lot of things backwards. I'm sorry, go on.
Oh, no, I was going to say I would love that, and I wanted to mention the title of your book, again, is Emotional Well-Being, Embracing the Gift of Life, and I definitely wanted to have you get into that because my understanding is this book has a big focus on being compassionate with the self, and
Absolutely.
that it ways to cope with life in the wake of stress, anxiety, and misperception. And what you're talking about plays into a lot of the work I do, too, because in my work in compassion, I'm constantly talking about there's so much more there than what we can see. Step outside of the situation, and that person that might have been a little irritated or something, we have no idea what went on in the last 24 hours of their life, or
let alone the last 24 minutes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right.
So stepping out. So please go ahead with that.
Well, I'll mention something, and that is, in Eastern philosophy and in Buddhist philosophy, they talk about two wings of a bird that are basically, again, the cornerstones of the whole philosophy. One is wisdom, and the other is compassion. And when you have wisdom and compassion, you have a completely different experience in life than when those two things are absent. And both of those two things, particularly compassion, can be cultivated. This is the other thing that I think is important. This word cultivation, the idea being that there are things that we can do in our life that helps promote experiences of compassion. It's everything is not just so natural. We have to orient ourselves. I will talk about perspective and compassion in a second, but I was going to mention, and I think we have so many things backwards. I've really been thinking much, much more about this. I've always had a thing about our educational system, and my thing is what we do is we move something, and I talk about this in my book, we move something that is internally validated. So the joy, the absolute joy of learning, just for the sake of learning, is transformed in our educational system to get attached to an external validation, somebody saying you've done well, or somebody giving you a high grade. And suddenly when we shift to external validation, it loses the value, the pure joy of it. I mean, that is our educational system. Well, lately I've been thinking sort of much more comprehensively, which is we don't teach our children how to pay attention. We yell at them. How many times have you had a teacher scream, pay attention? But nobody ever trains us how to pay attention. Nobody ever teaches us truly what ultimately is good for us in regards to what we should be paying attention to. I'll just interject something. I know a wonderful man who started just a tremendous process a few years back. He started handing out gratitude coins. And he tells a story about sitting in a diner. And he'd been doing this for a number of years, and a waitress had handed him his bill, and he reached into his pocket and said, "I'd like you to have this." And she looked at it, and she said, "Oh, my goodness, a gratitude coin. How wonderful this is." And he said, "Well, thank you for allowing me to have the opportunity to give it to you." And, of course, she smiled and walked away. Well, another woman walked up to him and said, "That was amazing. What is it you just did?" And it turns out she was a grade school teacher. And she said, "This is a fantastic thing you're doing. How would you feel if I used this in my class?" And he said, "I'd be delighted." And from that one incident, if you want to call it an incident, encounter, it's being used in 200 schools now, teaching kids, giving them these coins and saying, okay, hand a coin to someone that you feel grateful towards today, in this moment. And it's transforming the classroom. I mean, it's very, very powerful. These are the things we need to be doing in our educational system. We need to be training our children about what foods they really should be eating. For years, oh, no, that's family business. You can't make, it's not just church and state here. It's not just, well, you can't interfere with the family part. Well, I don't believe that. I mean, if our kids are spending 34, 40 hours a week, they spend more time in schools than they do interacting with people in their families. I think the onus is on us as a culture to provide them with an awareness of what ultimately emotional health is and well-being and how to get there. Sugar is everything. I'm maybe going all over the place here, but I'm on a roll because
that's okay.
What we're discovering now is through these abilities to measure things that we really couldn't measure 10 years ago, is that we know the impact that certain foods have on our brain chemistry. Sugar is a horrible thing for the brain. It is something that ultimately is the antithesis of what supports brain health. We want a healthy brain. We want to put the foods in our body that ultimately is going to support health in our brain. We want to encourage what's called social medicine, which is really embracing the idea that relationships are good for brain development. It's good for not just the overall health of the brain, but the way we process things. And we're beginning to understand this. We know these things now. Well, we have to now translate it into our school systems. We have to teach our young, if you will, because we as adults, parents, are not really probably capable of doing a very good job of that. So, mindfulness is now being introduced into the school systems, and they're having phenomenal success with it. It's spreading throughout America. There's a congressman in Ohio who's written a book called The Mindful Nation. There he is. It's an amazing thing that we actually have somebody from, our Congress that's talking about mindfulness. Obama was in Burma the other day. He used the word metta. It's unbelievable. Metta is essentially a reference to loving kindness in the Buddhist text. This is the President of the United States using that term. So it is beginning to spread, and I think it's such a healthy process if we can embrace it and really put it in the hands of the youth. So, yes.
I agree, and I think that it is so important because it is a component of life that is important as the fundamentals, reading, writing, arithmetic, and the other things that we have been teaching. and especially where we're teaching these kids so much more now than, say, when you and I went through grade school. The volume of information, I mean, they're studying things in elementary school that I was studying maybe in junior college. I don't,
Right.
The difference of that volume of information there that we're putting into them, they've got to have that balance to know how to relax, how to take the stress off. And I agree where we're seeing so many things come up, too, in these kids, dyslexia, ADHD, these things. The mindfulness is a critical piece to their well-being and to being able to continue to focus on the other things. And I like what you were bringing up about how much, and you were talking about external validation on things, and I don't think that's just in our school systems. I mean, that's everywhere. That's in our careers. Right. That's in our standings. It's among friendships. It's in relationships. So many people are always looking to that external validation. And I had this thought run through my head when you were talking about that. I had this little vision come through that was going, now what would it be like if kids just went to school and they decided what they wanted to learn?
Absolutely. That's right.
And they could just go in and pick, and then they could really be learning for the sake of learning. And what a different culture that would create.
The Waldorf schools. Yeah, the Waldorf schools do things that are, similar to that. And, I tell a story in my book. I talk about going to summer camp. I started summer camp when I was 8 years old. I grew up in New York City, and, all the kids, we had no money, but, we found some subsidized camp, and I call it a freedom camp. I mean, I think it was amazing. It was an integrated camp. We're talking about way back in the 50s, late 50s, and it was an amazing experience. And the reason I bring it up now is that, after we had our morning meal and we went back to, what's known as the bunk and cleaned up, the counselor would say, okay, what do you want to do? What do you guys want to do? Just imagine 10 to 12, 8, 9, 10-year-olds coming to a consensus about, let's do this. Okay, great, let's do this. Now, that's antithetical to what most camps were about, which had a very structured, this period you do this, next period you do that, and so on. Yeah, what if we allowed our kids to go to a school and we said, what do you want to learn today? What would you like to do today? There's no question that we'd have a whole different experience. You talk about math and reading and writing. What could be more essential than diet, exercise, focused attention, human interaction, and relationships? I mean, you want to talk about basics, those are the basics of life. And we really don't attend to those in a manner that helps to cultivate those. And we know now. We can't blame it on not knowing anymore. We know exercise is essential. We know certain foods are essential. We know social interaction is absolutely essential at the earliest stages of development in terms of brain health and perception and learning. Yeah.
And that interaction, I agree, is a big key. Again, I think it's missing. It's missing. We're seeing the struggles of not having that interaction and that communication going on today, and it definitely has got to be one of those cores that we bring in, because there's so many kids coming through and they really don't know how to interact with people.
Right.
And it's kind of a sad thing. I saw a cartoon the other day, and there were a bunch of kids, and they all had their cell phones and texting and not paying any attention at all. And the title of it was something to the effect of the zombie apocalypse is here.
Right. Yeah, right. Absolutely. No need to wait any longer. right.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting. Yeah. I was going to say it's an interesting
to anything,
thing.
not the trees, nothing, the streets, the cars, and the nothing.
Right. Right. Oh, there are more people getting, run over these days because they're walking across the street with their cell phones. But it is interesting. I know there's a lot of sort of negative view about technology and about cell phones and about Facebook, and you can go on and on and on. But if you think about what's underneath it, to me it's very, very telling. It is all about a desire to connect. It may be connecting in a way that is not as fruitful as sitting around the fire at night, telling the story about the hunt, or whatever it was our ancestors did. No question, it can't be as rewarding as that. But the desire is the same. It is wanting to be connected, wanting not to be isolated, not to be alone. I think that we are tribal. All right, Jesse, here we go. I'm going to ask you a question. Instead of telling you a story, I'll ask you a question. Now, I've asked many clients and students this question. So what's the difference between a lion and a tiger?
The difference between a lion and a tiger.
A tiger, right. Didn't know I was going to put you on the spot in your own show, right?
I did not. Wow. That's a good question. You've kind of got me thinking a ton of different here from. I'm thinking the lion and associating it with the ego and being very out there and open, but gentle at the same time. But then the tiger is a little more observant and watchful, I guess, in my thoughts.
You're pretty deep, Jesse. That's good. Most people say stripes. Not from you. I didn't get stripes.
You didn't get from me.
So a fundamental difference that people are not aware of. Tigers are solitary beings. In fact, a male tiger will mate, leave, and if he encounters his offspring, particularly if the offspring is male in his own territory, he'll kill it. Lions are completely social. They live based on a hierarchy of interaction and social relatedness. And I have said throughout my career that many of the problems that people have is they're leading tiger existence and they're lion-hearted. I truly believe it.
I think that that's so true. I think that, and I think this is part of why your message and my message both, and compassion being that common thread there, is so important because people really are craving that. They know that they're missing something and they don't completely know what it is. And It's that sharing, it's that giving, it's that interaction. And I know you talk about summer camps. It's some of my most favorable times. I did summer camps for 13 years myself, directing them. Started 1 year going as a camper and then ended up directing and running personal improvement programs and things within the camp structure, and so I have many fond memories of that. And I find that people really, really are, even those people that are kind of loners, still crave, as you say, that lion energy, that interaction. And one of the things I hope to bring back, I know in my own work too, and I know you do some of this as well, is retreats, because there's nothing like getting away, whether it's for a weekend or a week, and really focusing in on an experience.
Absolutely, right. I do week-long Bali retreats. So all of you, come to Bali. Amazing experience. It is incredible. You see people essentially arrive at the retreat, at the Zen resort, and they are transformed in 7 days. I mean, who they are when they leave, and it is very much in part with the social interaction that occurs, with the group dynamic that occurs, with the loving spirit, with the compassion. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about compassion, but compassion, and particularly compassion for the self, is absolutely crucial. We are so hard on ourselves, and there's a reason for it. Often we come from families where our parents were hard on us. I mean, how do you possibly explain why a parent would make derogatory remarks, at their child? Why would, for example, why would a parent say to a kid who's watching television, "Oh, you're just a lazy good-for-nothing"? I mean, what would compel someone to make that statement? And I think there's some obvious answers. Oh, well, they're frustrated and, they're angry and so on. And what we don't really see is really they're choosing to interact with their kid that way as a form of motivation. They're actually trying to motivate their child by virtue of telling them that you're a good-for-nothing, lazy person. And, of course, it doesn't work. All it does is it allows us to create a loop in our own brain, our own head, where we judge ourselves. And every time we don't live up to an expectation that we might hold for ourselves, whether we're conscious of it or not, we judge ourselves. We're very, very hard on ourselves. And part of the reason what I'm saying here is that we're hard on ourselves because we have inherited a belief structure that if we're not, we're just not going to really take care of business. We're not going to rise to the occasion. And it's a paradox because that is not how you rise to the occasion, by beating yourself up and by really, using that judgmental voice to try to, push yourself forward. It doesn't work. The greatest athletes in the world are the ones that shake off the problems that they experienced, the pitch before, or the shot before, as if it never occurred. You're talking about being present in the moment. There's such a thing as a flow state. Flow is about being completely present in that moment. And it doesn't matter what happened the moment before or what's going to happen the moment after, if they come at all. It is about being fully present in a non-judgmental way. This judgment part of us. Tara Brach writes about this. It's a main theme of her books, where we just beat ourselves up so much. And the message I try to give is give yourself some love. Be compassionate to yourself. Step back and say, wow, it's a struggle a lot of times to be alive. Of course it is. In Buddhism, they talk about 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows that we all experience. That's right, It's always challenging, but it's how you deal with that challenge and whether or not you're kind to yourself. My message is be kind to yourself. Love yourself. Give yourself a break. If you can't, who will?
And it kind of comes back to what you were mentioning earlier as well. When we remove that external validation, because you're right in that sense, and I'm getting confirmation from people in the chat room in regards to, yes, that's so true about being in the flow and not worrying about the moment that just went by and the moment that's yet to come, and just being here in that flow. But when we let go of that external validation, because that's coming through not only by trying to motivate in the negative example you said, but even through motivation of other ways of, you're going to excel in this world.
Right. Achieving. Right.
Achieving. And so many kids grow up trying to please parents, right. And then after that, they find a relationship, and then they're always trying to please their partner.
Right, definitely.
And they forget that the person they've really got to please is themselves.
Right.
And when we remove that external validation, we realize half the things we're trying for are not what we want.
Right. Yep. There's
At
no
least.
question that, the happier we are, the happier we make everybody. It's as simple as that. If you think about happiness as being in the light, you bring the light to the world. It's simple when you think about it that way.
Mhm.
I'll give you an example of the power of external validation. It's one of the studies that I talk about in my book. My book has a lot of stories, actually, and it really is. It's written for the general public to really integrate the things that we're talking about. A study was done years and years ago, actually, where a group of kids was selected, and their parents were asked to bring them to a clinic with one-way mirrors. And what was requested is that the parents bring at least one of their kids' favorite toys. And it was great. So, 20 kids, 30 kids, whatever it was. And the kids were in a room and playing with their toys, and they were simply observed. And it was noted how much time they spent playing with these toys. They created what's called a baseline. And then they did what's called intervened. They intervened by rewarding the kids every time they played with their favorite toys. And they created a baseline with that. And of course, at first there was a blip. Things went up because, they were being externally validated. And then a very interesting thing happened, which was the whole focus of the study. They stopped rewarding the children when they played with their favorite toys. And what do you think happened? They stopped playing with their toys. Unbelievable.
Right.
So they started from a place of an internal locus where they just loved playing with these particular things. And once it was transformed into an external validation, it lost its value. And that's what we do. We are so externally validated. When you grow up and you'll get the job, and you'll get the wife, and you'll get the husband, and you'll have the kid, and this and that, there is nothing more devastating, Jesse, than sitting down in front of somebody, and I talk about this as well in the book, who was literally moments away from blowing his brains out because at 46 years old, as the chief of a prestigious medical hospital, felt devoid of anything worth living any longer. I mean, that's just, it's an amazing thing because this person that I'm referring to, his whole life was geared to someday, when I get there, when I get there, when I get there, when I get there, it was all about achievement. And once he arrived, he hated it. It just, he certainly missed the journey, Anyhow.
And I think that is a big key there because as you were talking about that, and I was thinking this is something that happens a lot of times with, kind of like with the example you were giving and everything, and with this external focus, where people start to follow their passion. And they get so reliant on those external validations, on the achievement, on this, on that, and then they lose their momentum. They lose their motivation.
They sure do.
They lose why they started it, just like the children lost their momentum with things along the way.
Absolutely.
Because it shifts from being something that they love doing, that they're passionate about, to being obligation, responsibility. There's so much stress that goes with that external validation piece.
Right.
And
we are stressing our children out. It's just unbelievable. I mean, I live in a fairly affluent area now, and oh my God, these kids, their schedule. I mean, I can't keep up. I couldn't keep up with my own kid's schedule, let alone you know, it's one thing after the other. I mean, whatever happened to just hanging out? You know, I mean, I'd come home from school and I would hang out at the ballpark. You know, we hung out. You know, whatever happened to the pop-in? You know, where somebody just, hey, popped in, how you doing? Now everything is scheduled, play dates and, you know, music lessons and baseball and soccer and, oh, gosh. It just takes the joy out of it. It really does. And it, you know, you remember that kid, you must have seen the movie, as most people have, The Breakfast Club? You remember that film?
Right.
You know, I mean, the kid that was so poignant. I mean, everybody remembers the sort of the rebel, but it was the bright kid. You remember the nerd, the bright kid? You know what he was doing there? He was there because he was going to blow his brains out. He had a flare gun in his locker, and a flare gun went off. That's how he got busted and sent to detention. And why was he going to blow his brains out? Because he got a C in shop class. Straight A student, he got a C in shop class. That was it, end of his life. Now, that might be an extreme example, but it's along a continuum that we're seeing more and more of this. You know, this striving, and it's just, we've got to breathe. We have to stop and truly smell the roses. It's what they're there for. They are not, they don't feel appreciated if you don't smell them, you know?
Well, that's a good point. Go out, smell the roses so you can make the roses feel appreciated.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what they're there for.
And I think, too, when you're bringing that up, where a lot of that pressure came from is, and I noticed that in the yuppie generation, so many of them had to have their kid be the brightest kid on the block. Right. You know, their kid had to be doing some language the rest of the block wasn't doing.
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of that pressure kind of originated in some ways.
Definitely.
In there.
Yep.
I want to tap on to a couple of other things here as well that you delve into. You deal with something that's called the big mind process. Can you talk a little about that?
Sure. Actually, we have created a process called mindful voice integration, which grew out of Big Mind. And Big Mind grew out of a process that's a Gestalt process called voice dialogue. And essentially what it is recognizing that there is a committee that lives among all of us. And that committee is numerous, and it is all of the various voices that exist in every one of us. And what mindful voice integration is literally a process where I will sit with an individual or sit with a group for that matter, and I will ask to speak to a particular voice as opposed to the individual. So if I'm dealing with Bill, I'll say to Bill, I would like to speak to, and generally start with a voice called the protector. This does come from Big Mind, and I'll say a little bit about Big Mind in a moment. Can I please speak to the voice of the protector? Now, I'm not, what's happening here is I'm not talking to Bill now. I'm actually talking to Bill's protector, and I'll say to the protector, so tell me, what is your role? And a protector will say, well, I protect. I'll say, well, how do you protect? And then we'll delve into the various ways in which Bill's protector goes about protecting Bill in his world. And perhaps we'll delve into how the protector learned to do his job. And, you know, when did the protector learn, and what particular incidences may have shaped the way in which the protector goes about doing that. And it's very interesting because at some point I'll say to the protector, and I'll say, so tell me, you know, what does Bill think about you? And suddenly it's a very different, direct, embodied experience of what goes on inside of us. And I may delve into dozens of voices, with an individual or with a group. And it's a very powerful experience because it is embodied, meaning you do have a direct experience. Rather than talking about something, when you talk from a place, and people really get into it. People, let me talk to the voice of anger. Let me talk to the voice of love. Let me talk to the voice of compassion. It's a fantastic voice when we do the voice of compassion. I keep referring to we because I do these retreats in Bali with a partner, and we integrate mindful voice integration in the process of our mindfulness retreat. And the reason why it's called mindful voice integration is we hold it with the tenets of mindfulness, non-judging awareness, focused attention, and people have an experience of integrating all of these various voices that they've experienced through the process. So that's what mindful voice integration is about.
That's really exciting, I think. And I'm just wondering, from this aspect, in a sense, we have people who are schizophrenic.
Right.
How would something like, that's obviously varying some because you've got a completely different personality coming out, or is that actually an aspect of somebody who lets themselves roll from one part of themselves to another,
right.
One voice to another?
Right. It's a common sort of response or question when you start talking about voices. And frankly, it doesn't even have to be categorized as a voice. This is very, very different than the process that goes on with someone who's suffering from schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is really about falling away, if you will, into a place of unreality. So when you talk about a schizophrenic process, what happens is that someone suddenly shifts. They used to talk about different personalities, and that was erroneous as well. It's really not about split personalities. It's about suddenly finding oneself with their attention focused on something that is unreal. It's not reality anymore. It's not a reality-based experience. So they may hear a voice that they're experiencing in a manner that is different than when I say, let me talk to the voice of anger, or let me talk to the voice of the protector. Give these aspects of yourself a voice to express themselves. It's very different when you're dealing with schizophrenia because there's no groundedness in that schizophrenic's experience. That voice may be the voice of God that they're hearing that's directing them to do certain things. It's an externalized process. So it really is very different than that. And I would certainly be very cautious about using something like mindful voice integration, big mind, voice dialogue, any of those processes, Gestalt in general, with somebody who's suffering from schizophrenia.
I knew that question might be rolling through some of our listeners' mind, which is why I wanted to bring it up. And I also wanted people to realize that by tapping into things the way you're doing them through voice integration, voice dialogue, big mind processes, that it doesn't mean that you're schizophrenic by doing this. That what we're really doing is actually discovering all parts of ourselves in
Correct.
this process and honoring all these different parts of ourself, be that the protector or the achiever or the compassionate side or whatever side that we're tapping into, whatever voice it's representing. And without having some of the formal terminology, I've gone in and done some of this work on my own with myself and just had some conversations and said, well, okay, so my money self,
Right.
what is it that you're wanting
Right.
from things? My compassion side, what is it that you're wanting? My romance side, what is it that you're wanting? And these can be very, very valuable to tap in and to have somebody like yourself asking these questions and bringing this awareness out, because this can create some very strong, deep awareness of the self.
That's exactly right. That's what it does, definitely. And it really is very different. I've done psychotherapy for 30 years now. It's very different talking about something than having a direct experience. Gestalt, which is, a very powerful method that can be used in psychotherapy, is a process of direct experience. So, for example, a Gestalt technique would be you would put two chairs facing each other, and you would have a client sit in the chair and say, okay, I want you to imagine that in this chair sits your mother, or whatever you're working on. It's always the mother, right, Jesse? So, what I'd like you to do is...
It's always one parent or the other.
Yeah, it's always one or the other, right? So, you would direct the client to talk to, it's called the empty chair. Now, why would you have somebody talk to an empty chair? Because in the doing of that, the client has a direct experience. It doesn't matter that there may not be anything coming back from literally a person sitting across from them, but they're having an experience of expressing what they're feeling. That's when you talk about something that's embodied, you're feeling it in your body. So if you're angry, for example, at that person sitting theoretically in that chair, you're going to have that experience. It's very different than discussing it with a therapist about, oh, yeah, this event happened and I was angry and so on. So the more we can embody things, the more we can be directly in touch with our body. We talk about mindfulness. Well, one of the key foundations of mindfulness is mindfulness of the body. It's really being grounded in the body. So much of us, or so many of us, are not connected to our body, and our body it's like the antenna that really filters everything that's going on in the universe. Is processed through our body. So when we're disconnected from that, we're really operating from a deficit.
And I agree, and I feel like, too, through this process, that another aspect of it is helping the individual to take responsibility and own their thoughts and their feelings in this process, as opposed to somebody telling them, like in traditional therapy, telling them, okay, you need to go do this, you need to go do that. And here you're coming to those realizations, so it has that opportunity to really clear on a much deeper level and to make a much bigger breakthrough because you're coming to your own realizations.
Right, that's correct. That's exactly right. Because you're having a direct experience.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're involved, I mean, I've done hundreds of hours of this. The big mind process is similar. I would say what's somewhat different about big mind is that it's not necessarily held in this sort of tenets of mindfulness, and big mind really incorporates a lot of Zen traditions, wisdoms in the process of using those voices as well. And mindful voice integration is more aligned with, I would say, the experience that people are naturally having, although we might do some transcendent voices as well, which is interesting. It really is an invitation for somebody to have a direct experience of so many of the aspects that exist in us, but we don't pay attention to. Again, it's an attention-focused process. It creates awareness. It's all about creating awareness.
And that is the key. And I think that's where we're seeing so much value today of doing this blending of psychology and mindfulness.
That's right.
Is bringing in that awareness factor, and that's why it's so important. I mean, I'm seeing this as a bigger and bigger trend because I'm finding and connecting with a lot of people out there that have a traditional psychology or counseling background, and they're moving into different dynamics of spirituality in their practice. And I think, I don't know how you feel about this or what your thoughts are, but my observation is that a lot of the so-called traditional therapy, traditional psychology, is not working for people. And they're having to add something to it.
Absolutely. And, look, I will tell you that much of what we have done as psychotherapists have been founded in theories that just have not really held water, if you will. If you look at, it's very interesting how these things occur. If you look at Freudian psychology and you look at the theories of Freud, and I mean, there's very little support or evidence that any of it was particularly accurate. It's as simple as that. I always feel funny, when I say anything that might be somewhat pejorative about the father of psychology, but I mean, some of what he said is, give me a break, I'll tell you. It's like, it's as far-fetched and as out there as, quite frankly, some of the religious dogma you hear, from various religions. I mean, it's just, so we are evolving. We as a culture, we as a planet, we as a profession in psychology are constantly evolving, and that's a good thing. And with evolution comes different kind of insight and different kinds of practice. And I agree with you. More and more people are definitely integrating, whether it be mindfulness or spirituality, in their practice. Yeah.
And what I think is good is this is helping actually both fields in a way, because more people are delving into the spiritual practices that didn't before, because they're finding people like yourself that are bridging this gap. And there's a lot of people, I think, that have wanted to get help or felt like they needed to talk with somebody, but that stigma of going to a traditional psychiatrist or psychologist was too much for them.
Right.
And they wouldn't seek out help that they needed.
Right.
And so I'm really happy to see this bridging happening. I'm really happy to see more people moving into this merging of fields and bringing in the spiritual, because I feel like it's removing a lot of the stigmas. And I feel like it's opening huge doors for people to go ahead and make those progressions. And it opens that opportunity of, you can now go to a spiritual person, or you can go to somebody that's got all the technical degrees, or wherever your comfort zone is.
Right. Absolutely. Definitely. I come from the place of, we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. So, you might as well integrate that in the work that you do, whether it be psychotherapy or whether it be art. So, but I would agree that, yeah.
We forget that. I think we get so wrapped up in being a human being trying to get spiritual, that we forget we're already spiritual and we're just having a human experience.
And I think, I mean, this is to me, a really important point. And that the point is that just embracing that awareness, just paying attention to what you just said, what I just said, can really shift the way we experience the world. These sort of aha moments is very interesting about change. Change occurs. You can build up to change and build up to change, and it could be years and years, and in a moment, things can shift because you have a different awareness about something. And once that awareness is there, it can so impact the way you relate to your life. Mindfulness is really about observing the way you relate to yourself, to your thoughts, to your body, to the world. It's a very reflective practice. The bottom line is we're not going to find it out there. It is about having an ability to go inside and to still ourselves and to just be that deep pool that allows us to feel grounded, allows us to be, connected to ourselves and then connected to other human beings. Every time we take a flight, what does the flight attendant tell us? Put your own oxygen mask on first. No doubt about it.
And I think, too, if we got really honest with ourselves, that most people would say a lot of what they do is about trying to satisfy, or if we go back to some of our terms earlier tonight, trying to validate the human self instead of living for that spiritual self. And if we just shift our focus and say, okay, well, what does my spiritual self want to do? What is it? What's going to make it happy? What does it want to do? And what if I shifted and started doing more things to feed my spiritual self?
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I will often refer to it in my practice, in my psychotherapy practice, as your higher self. I will literally sit with a client and say, look, I will tell you flat out that my job is to try to help motivate you to find and live from your higher self. That's what I'm trying to facilitate. And it's the same difference as what you're talking about. That's correct. I was listening just, a couple of days ago. Thich Nhat Hanh is a wonderful, I guess he's Thai or maybe he's Vietnamese, I'm not sure. But anyhow, he's a phenomenal practitioner of Buddhist philosophy, and he was talking about nirvana. What is nirvana? You can go on YouTube and look it up. What is nirvana? And it's very interesting because what he's talking about is something that I've always believed. I gave you a little bit about my past, but I think what I've always believed is we're pure energy. We always have been, we always will be. And that's what spirit is about. Obviously our body is continually changing, and at some point it is very likely we're all going to leave this body. But in terms of the spiritual energy, I think it's everlasting. And I think when you embrace that, there's a freedom in that. There's something that I think allows you to take life in stride in a different way than when you don't really reflect on that possibility. But that's just me.
I agree, and I think that we get here and we get so wrapped up again in that human aspect that we forget that our human body is really just like a car that we're driving for a while.
That's exactly right.
The soul's not going to stop existing when the human body does. It's going to keep going.
That's right.
It's just going to find a different vehicle to drive.
Yep. That's right. That's right.
Get it.
Yep. Chapter 1 of my book is Embracing Impermanence.
Nice.
Because what creates pain and suffering is that we try to make everything permanent. We try to control things. We try to predict things, I mean, I love the image of the skinny guru with a loincloth on in a one-legged yoga pose on top of a surfboard riding the wave. I don't know. That image is just precious to me. And, that's what I think, need to do. We need to have the flexibility of just riding this life. And the more we try to control it and contain it and predict it, and it creates a lot of sorrow, a lot of suffering, a lot of tension. We want to be expansive and flowing. We don't want to be tense and knotted, and so many of us are.
Exactly. And it's true, and that visual that you give there also reminds us that just because we're very spiritual doesn't mean you don't get out and play and have fun.
Oh, fun is the most underrated thing there is. It's unbelievable. I can't tell you how many couples I've sat with over the years, and I'll say, so what do you two do for fun? And they look at me and like, what did you say? I said,
what's
fun.
that three-letter word you're using?
Remember? Fun? Yeah.
No,
yeah,
I want to touch.
absolutely.
It always amazes me how the time winds down on us here so quickly, but I also wanted to mention that you've developed and founded the Academy of Mindful Psychology. Do you want to touch on that for a couple of minutes?
Yeah, I mean, it's still in its infancy, and really the whole idea is to embrace this idea of mindful psychology. It's not just mindfulness, and it's not just psychology. It's mindful psychology, which is really this integration of West and East and neuroscience and compassion, all under one sort of roof, if you will. It is truly an integrative approach. And the Academy of Mindful Psychology is really a place where teachings and offerings and retreats and workshops and courses and eventually we will have professionals as well as non-professional associations for people that really want to find a place to go where they can really get what is current, what's happening. I hope to draw, many of the top people in the field to be able to submit articles and talk about what it is they're doing and what their workshops are. So the dream is to have a one-stop place where you can go and really see what's current as related to all of these ingredients, mindfulness, psychology, and neuroscience. So that's what the Academy is about.
And this information, as well as information on your books and the work you do with people, is all found on your website, which is www.drneilkobrin.com. That's DRNIELKOBRIN.com. And if you could give us just a little taste, too, because I know you have different services, or I should give you that opportunity. If there's any workshops or anything that are coming up that people should know about, or if they come and they say, Dr. Neil, I love what you've been saying, I want to work with you, what do we do?
Okay, great. So, you can go to Dr. Neil, Neil, PhD. You can go to Dr. Neil, KOBRIN.com. It'll bring you to the website. My Bali workshops are coming, so that's probably the most current thing, starting in May. May 23rd, I think we do a week-long in Bali, and then 2 more in August. I have just shot a series of DVDs. They are still essentially on the editor's table, but we're coming very, very close to having a final product. 18 DVDs were shot, and I'm going to be offering them as part of an online course, along with a workbook and an hour with me each week to discuss the various things that are housed in these DVDs, most of which is part of the content of the book. The book is just so very rich in material and fun to read as well. So I'm really trying to put out a lot of that content in as many ways as possible. I'm also, although they're not available yet, I've done quite a few interviews now. I think I mentioned that I'm hosting a TV show, Mindful TV, and having some very interesting guests. It was really great. I had Dr. Paul Gilbert from England, and we didn't spend that much time about compassion, but we talked about compassion-focused therapy. He's one of the pioneers of that, and it was just great. The information will be on the website as well eventually. So a lot of this is new and evolving, but that's the best place, and I'm happy to reach out and talk to anyone, email me, certainly through the website. I have my own blog talk radio show as well, so tune in there, and any way that I can be of assistance. I do it on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Pacific time, but certainly most of the listeners are archived listeners, and I'm happy to say that there's been a great response there. So, although I love to dialogue with live callers as well. So
great. And so these are definitely some different things that you have going on, and I did notice you've got, as you mentioned, the retreats in Bali. May 25th is what I'm showing, Mindfulness and Emotional Health in Bali. Right. August 17th, Mindfulness and Emotional Health in Bali, and then August 24th, Mindfulness and Beyond in Bali.
Right. That's correct.
So,
and it is, yep. And there will be workshops as well in the U.S. I haven't announced a date yet, but I will be doing a workshop in June in the Bay Area as well.
Wonderful.
So, yep.
And again, your book is titled Emotional Well-Being, Embracing the Gift of Life, and that is on your website as well. You do psychotherapy services with individuals, couples, and family. You do the mindful voice integration work, and you're also available for speaking engagements. I know also you do educational consulting services as well as organizational consulting services. So a whole variety
Sounds like a lot of things, doesn't it?
A big variety of choices there for people to select from and work with. And I so appreciate the work you're doing, because I just feel like this is so valuable and so important, and you're filling such a I would say a critical need in society, and with your work in this blending of psychology and mindfulness. Is there anything else you want to make sure you get in tonight?
No, I've enjoyed this. I mean, the only thing I want to get in tonight is, for all of your listeners, reach out, check out the blogs, communicate. I like interaction, and I think that we have a tremendous opportunity. There's a lot of negativity out there, but, when you step back and you think about how connected we are globally now, it's unbelievable. It's fantastic. The power of the Internet, really, we will change the world, because now we have an opportunity to talk with one another like we never have had before. So I'm actually very optimistic, despite some of the horrors and tragedies that, have just befallen our nation and our planet. But underneath it, I think that, we have tremendous opportunity. So that's what I want to say.
I so agree, and I have to say the Internet has provided me a lot of connections, yourself included, to get to know different people's work, but that I've also then been able to go out and see in person. And I think that's part of the key is you might make the connections there, but also get out and meet people too.
Absolutely. Right.
You know, I don't mean meet people necessarily like through Facebook for dating, but
right.
I mean as far as learning about people and like-minded people and getting to these events and doing these types of work like what you're doing. And I just want to mention that we've been talking tonight with Dr. Neil Kobrin, and he's been sharing with us his work in mindful psychology, as well as his book, Emotional Well-Being, Embracing the Gift of Life. Again, you can learn more about his work through his website at www.drneilkobrin.com. And, you know, I so appreciate you being here, and I really thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on Active Passion tonight.
My pleasure.
And I look forward to the work that you will keep producing and seeing what's coming out there. And who knows, maybe I'll make it to Bali one of these days.
That would be great. That would be, I'll tell you, you will never regret that decision. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience. And not nearly as pricey as you might think. This is really good value. So, well, great. I very much appreciate you having me on, and it was a delight talking to you and to all your listeners. You know, I wish you the best, and all I can say is cultivate awareness. You know,
I feel like I'm doing that every day, and I'm being brought more and more to spark those lights along the way. So
that's great. That is great.
Thank you so much.
All right, Jessie. Thank you. Good night. Good night, everybody.
Good night. And I want to mention here for our listeners that next week I will have Danielle Huff on my show. She's going to be sharing with us how to bring out your intuitive abilities and use them to help yourself. Danielle is going to be talking about how to use intuition for healing and creating successes, as well as the importance of the nervous system in relation to our intuition. And she will also be discussing the use of neuro-linguistic programming and her new book out, I'm More Than That, which is about letting go of limiting beliefs, manifesting desires, and creating a new reality for yourself. If any of you, again, are in the Cedar City or Southern Utah area, tomorrow, April 20th, I will be at Main Street Books on Main Street from 2 to 3 p.m. doing a book signing for my books, Activating Compassion and Activating Compassion, the workbook. So if you get a chance, at least even stop in and say hi if you're in the area. And my next set of books, which are based on relationships, will be available for purchase, I'm hoping, this week to get them out for you. And that's going to be a look at how to find and develop a relationship with someone that will last a lifetime with you. It is a look at how we all take on masculine and feminine energy roles, no matter what sex we are born into. And also, again, I'm working on putting together some venues outside of my main area and looking at different things that I can set up this year, possibly some things happening in the fall going on around the Colorado area, possibly some things coming up in California. You can stay on top of those things as they come out through both my website is one area, but also at jessieannnicholsgeorge.eventbrite.com. And if you'd like to find out more about the work I'm doing with Compassion, you can connect with me, check out my blog, purchase products or services that I offer, find ways to connect with me, listen to archive shows or see upcoming shows. I also have video tips that are on my website, and you can do all that at the website there, jessieannnicholsgeorge1, that's the number 1.com. And I'm getting ready to put out a brand new video here. Probably tomorrow I'm going to be putting that together with even more tips. So I've tried to get one of those out a month. And there's also a section on my website for all of the Main Street Universe shows. And you can follow all of our hosts there, catch up on upcoming shows that are coming up, as well as the archive shows, learn a little bit about the people that are a part of Main Street Universe, and that's all listed at the bottom of today's show description, so that's available there. My book is available on Amazon.com and BarnesNoble.com for paperback and through Smashwords as an ebook, including Kindle and PDF versions there. And the special that I have running right now for the month of April is a discounted rate on my books, both Activating Compassion and Activating Compassion, the workbook. And during this month of April, I am offering the paperback versions for only $3.99 and the ebook version for only $1.99. There's no limit on how many copies you can get. You can go to that main page on my website. It's got the promo codes as well as the links there so that you can go ahead and make that purchase. And also, if you sign up for my mailing list, which is really great, I send a newsletter out once a week, and that has our upcoming guest on it. It has my blog post on it. It has events that are going on. It has thoughts for the week on it. It has the new videos or tips that are on it. So it's got a whole ton of things that come out in that newsletter. And when you sign up for that, you also get the Genesis Clearing Statement for free. You get a written version as well as 3 audio versions absolutely free just for signing up to go onto the mailing list. So that's a great option for you to take advantage of. And don't forget that here on Main Street Universe, we've got several shows throughout the week. Sunday nights we have Darren Bouquet, who is a reader at Madame Laveau in New Orleans, doing spiritual insights, and he also does some readings on his show. Monday nights we have Kevin Baird, Walking on the Sidewalk. He works with his Horizon Oracle Journeys deck, which is a deck that he himself created, and he does readings live on the air. So if you're ever at one of those points you wanted a little insight or a little perspective, he's a great show to go into, as well as Darren's show. Tuesdays is Inner Wisdom with Mary Phelan, and she does a variety of things, also wonderful for getting insights on what's happening in your life. Wednesday nights is our flagship show, and that's hosted by Daniel and Janice, and they discuss all different types of topics. This past Wednesday, they had the band Woven Green on, really wonderful band, really wonderful music there that they're working with. Again, I also want to mention, if you missed last week's show with Stephen Halpern, I encourage you to go back and listen to that in the archives, and that was a show here on Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour. My name is Jessie Ann Nichols George, and I want to thank you so much for being here tonight. I look forward to seeing you back here next week as we delve more into activating compassion. And don't forget, if you've enjoyed my show this evening, share it with others. Dr. Neil shared a tremendous amount of wonderful information with us tonight, and it's going to be available at the same link in our archives, as well as on my website and at facebook.com/activatingcompassion/notes. All the archive shows are there as well. I'm going to leave you tonight with the song Yearning For, which is also known by as Over and Over by Shemshai. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you again next week right here on Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour. May you enjoy the rest of your weekend and have an amazing week.
And if I could see what makes me blind, I would soar to the edge of my mind, and to touch what seems unreal, just to show you the way that I feel. And we are in time with time, one with the season of change inside. And we are in tune with the tune, caught in a balance of sun and moon. Oh, deep inside, the light within, shining to show you it's here to begin. When all I have is all I need, I will soar to the edge of eternity. And we see it eye to eye, love is still burning. Deep in your spirit, your heart still yearning for. Yearning for. Over and over, life is your lover, learning to walk